She broke your heart, thinking she won. She thought walking away would prove she had the power, that your world would crumble without her. But what she never expected was that your silence, the very thing she dismissed as weakness, would become the weapon that shattered her ego into pieces. When you stopped chasing, something inside her cracked. When you refused to explain, she lost her audience. When you went silent, she lost her control. That silence wasn't just quiet, it was surgical. It cut deeper than any words ever could, because it forced her to hear something she'd never heard before: the sound of her own emptiness. In those early days after she walked away, you felt the chaos, the sleepless nights, the replay of conversations that no longer made sense. You almost texted, almost called, almost begged for answers that didn't exist. But something inside you stopped, a quiet voice whispering, "Don't move. Let the silence speak." At first, that stillness burned. It felt unnatural not to explain yourself, not to fight for what you believed was real. But the longer you stayed silent, the more you began to understand its hidden power. Silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. It's not about ignoring her. It's about reclaiming yourself. You realized that every message you didn't send was a message in itself. Every minute you didn't reach out was a declaration. I'm not chasing what already left. Meanwhile, she watched. Maybe not openly, but she noticed. The absence of your attention hit harder than your presence ever did. She scrolled through your social media, half expecting a story meant for her, a caption screaming heartbreak, something to prove she still mattered. But there was nothing. Just stillness, just peace. And that silence started to whisper the one thing her ego couldn't handle. You moved on without needing her validation. She began to overthink, rewinding every memory, wondering how the man who once poured out his soul could now give her nothing. That uncertainty became her punishment. What she didn't realize is that your silence wasn't about revenge. It was about resurrection. You were rebuilding in the shadows. Each quiet day was a step toward becoming a man who no longer needed closure from chaos. While she chased attention, you chased clarity. While she performed strength, you became it. Silence became your discipline. It taught you that control isn't found in loud emotions, but in calm detachment. You stopped being the man who explained himself to be understood. You became the man who let silence define him. And that's when everything reversed. Because while she thought ending things made her powerful, your silence made her powerless. She broke your heart, but in your stillness, you broke her illusion of control. And now, no matter what she does, she can't escape the echo of the man who never needed to say a word to win. Section 1. The Shift of Power. At first, she expected the same story she's seen from every man she's ever broken. Tears, explanations, long paragraphs begging for another chance. She waited for the apology that would reassure her ego that she still mattered. But it never came. You didn't call. You didn't chase. You simply disappeared into silence. And that single decision changed everything. What she thought was control began to dissolve, quietly, invisibly, beneath the weight of your absence. She scrolled through her phone at night, thumb hovering over your name, fighting the urge to check if you'd finally cracked. But every minute of your stillness became proof that you weren't the man she thought she could manipulate anymore. That's how power shifts, not through argument, but through composure. Your silence started rewriting the story in her mind. You stopped being the rejected lover and became the mystery. You stopped being the victim and became the void she couldn't fill. She tells her friends she doesn't care, that you were never that special, but the way she says it gives her away. There's a nervous laugh, a flicker of irritation whenever your name comes up, because deep down she's disturbed by the fact that her leaving didn't crush you. It liberated you. She used to feed off your attention, your reactions, your emotional energy. That was her mirror. Without it, she doesn't know who she is anymore. She starts checking who watches her stories, posting things meant to provoke you, pretending it's confidence when it's really curiosity. She needs to know if she still has access to your emotions, but she doesn't. You're no longer performing pain for her entertainment. You're calm, detached, unavailable. And that's the most attractive energy a man can possess. That shift of power isn't loud. It's subtle. It happens in your posture, in the way you stop explaining yourself, in the way your silence becomes so disciplined it unnerves her. She thought she was the storm, but you became the eye of it. Unmoved, unshaken, centered. And while she's spinning in circles trying to figure you out, you've already stepped into a higher state of self-respect. That's the secret most men never learn. Women don't lose interest when you fall silent. They start to question themselves. Your stillness forces them to face the truth. If they can't provoke you, they no longer own you. That's when fascination begins. Because in a world addicted to noise, your silence becomes rare. In a sea of desperate men explaining, apologizing, and begging, you stand still like a monument of control. That's the shift. The invisible transformation that happens the moment you choose discipline over emotion. You stopped chasing closure and became the closure. And somewhere between her pride and your peace, she realizes she didn't break you. She awoke something in you she'll never be able to destroy again. Section 2. Her ego craves reaction. Ego is an addict. It feeds on response. The moment you stopped replying, you starved the addiction she didn't even know she had. Every relationship she's ever had followed the same script. She provokes, he explains. She withdraws, he chases. That pattern is her oxygen because it lets her believe she's the one in control. But when you broke the pattern, her mind couldn't process it. At first, she told herself you were pretending, that you'd eventually crack and come crawling back. She waited. Days passed, then weeks. Still nothing. That's when irritation turned to anxiety. Her ego began whispering the most dangerous question a woman with pride can hear. What if he actually moved on? She checks her phone every morning, expecting a message that never comes. She looks at old pictures, not because she misses you, but because she needs to remember she mattered. She tells her friends she's fine, but every conversation somehow drifts back to you. He's acting weird, she says, pretending it's annoyance. But the truth is, she's haunted by your indifference. Silence is cruel like that. It doesn't shout. It echoes. It forces her to relive the moments when she felt powerful. Only now the memories sting because they no longer control you. Your lack of response has become a mirror reflecting her need for validation. She doesn't hate you. She hates that you stopped proving her importance. And so the games begin. The half-hearted story posts, the sudden likes on your old pictures, the carefully crafted captions that seem aimed at no one and everyone. These aren't confidence, they're fishing lines. Each one cast in hopes you'll bite, that you'll give her the hit of attention she's starving for. But your silence denies her that hit again and again. That's what truly destroys her ego. Not revenge, not confrontation, but consistency. Every time you choose calm over reaction, she spirals a little deeper into her own confusion. Because now, she's no longer sure who's chasing who. You see, when a man detaches, a woman's ego panics. Love can handle distance, ego cannot. It demands an audience. It needs applause. When you vanish, the stage goes dark, and she's left alone with her insecurities. She starts to realize how much of her identity was built on being desired. That realization hurts. She'll tell herself she's over you, but the more she tries to prove it, the more she exposes her obsession. Silence flips the polarity of power. It turns her certainty into doubt and your pain into peace. And that's the paradox of detachment. The less you try to win her back, the more she tries to win back the version of herself that felt admired. So stay silent, not to punish, but to preserve. Let her ego crumble under the weight of its own hunger. Because the moment you stop reacting, you become something her pride can't defeat. Mystery. And mystery, brother, is what she'll chase long after love has died. Section 3. The power of absence. There's a reason silence feels louder after a breakup. It's not the absence of words, it's the presence of realization. The moment you pulled back, her world began to shift. She didn't notice it right away. At first, she enjoyed the freedom, convinced she'd made the right choice. She filled her days with distractions, friends, nights out, stories meant to project happiness. But here's what happens when a man who once gave his full presence suddenly disappears. The illusion of control collapses. Your absence became a shadow in every room she walked into. She laughed, but it felt forced. She posted, but it felt hollow. Because deep down, she could sense it. Something in the balance had changed. You weren't orbiting her anymore. You were gone. That emptiness became uncomfortable. It started as curiosity, then turned into tension. She'd check her phone more than she'd admit, wondering if you'd ever reach out, waiting for that familiar buzz that once gave her power. But every time her screen stayed dark, the truth grew heavier. She wasn't the center of your world anymore. That silence forced her to sit with a reality she never prepared for. She wasn't missed the way she imagined. That's when absence becomes power. Because while she was trying to move on, you were mastering the art of detachment. You weren't running from the pain. You were using it. Each quiet night became a lesson in emotional control. Each ignored urge to text became a brick in the foundation of your new strength. You learned what most men never do. Presence wins her attention, but absence wins her respect. The irony? She'll never admit this shift out loud. Pride won't let her. But her actions betray her. She starts posting things that feel like bait. Half smiles, cryptic captions, subtle reminders that she exists. She wants to test your attention, to see if she can still command your focus. But the more you stay silent, the more her mind twists the story. Why isn't he watching? Did he find someone else? Was he pretending all along? That spiral is your silence doing its work. Absence amplifies everything she ignored when you were available. Your value, your calm, your presence. Now she feels the weight of what she lost, not through your words, but through your disappearance. That's why absence is not emptiness. It's influence without effort. You're no longer trying to convince her of your worth. She's trying to remember why she ever doubted it. Every moment you remain composed, you remind her that your energy was a privilege, not a right. And soon she'll realize the cruel truth. She didn't just lose a man. She lost the peace that came with being around you. That's what true absence does. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't explain. It simply exists in the back of her mind, like a quiet storm she can't outrun. You don't need to speak for her to hear you. Your silence has already said everything. Section 4. The internal war. On the outside, she looks fine, maybe even better than before. She's posting pictures, laughing with friends, pretending life has moved on. But beneath that polished surface, a war is raging. The battle isn't between you and her anymore. It's between her ego and her emotions. Her pride wants to believe she made the right choice, but her emotions whisper that she lost something real. Every time she scrolls through her phone and doesn't see your name, a quiet panic spreads through her chest. She remembers the stability you brought, the way your energy grounded her chaos, and now that it's gone, everything around her feels louder and emptier at the same time. That's the cruel paradox of silence. It exposes everything noise once hid. In her mind, she replays the breakup like a film she can't stop watching, but every time she does, the scenes shift. What once looked like victory now looks like regret. She starts to remember the softness in your eyes, the patience in your tone, the calm in your presence. But what hits her hardest is that you're no longer available for her to test that power against. Before, your emotions were her playground. She could pull away and you'd follow. She could stay silent and you'd chase. That predictability fed her ego, but it also gave her security. Now that structure has collapsed, and she's free-falling into uncertainty. That's the war. The ego screams, "I don't need him." But the silence makes her wonder, why can't I stop thinking about him? As days turn into weeks, her actions begin to betray her emotions. The random likes, the subtle story replies, the sudden nostalgia in her captions. She tells herself it's harmless, but deep down, she's searching for signs that she still matters to you. And when those signs don't come, frustration builds. You've taken away her favorite form of control, your reaction. The moment you stopped engaging, you forced her to face herself. That's the power most men never understand. Silence isn't passive. It's psychological warfare. You're not fighting her. You're letting her fight her own mind. Meanwhile, you're no longer at war. You've found peace in discipline. The same silence that once felt unbearable now feels sacred. You're not checking her profile, not replaying her words, not writing messages you'll never send. You're focused on becoming. While she's trapped in memories, you're building momentum. That's the contrast she can't stand. You used to be predictable, emotional, available. Now, you're detached, composed, distant. And that unpredictability terrifies her. Because for the first time, she's not sure how the story ends. Her ego wants closure, but your silence refuses to give it. Every unanswered thought, every ignored impulse, every quiet day, it all becomes proof that you've evolved beyond her reach. And once a woman realizes she no longer has emotional access to you, that's when she truly understands what she lost. The war inside her doesn't end when you speak. It ends when she finally accepts the truth your silence has been shouting all along. You've outgrown her chaos. Section 5. The psychological switch. There comes a moment in every silent standoff where something inside her mind flips, an invisible switch that changes confusion into obsession. At first, your silence annoyed her. It made her question your emotions, your loyalty, your attachment. She told herself you were immature, cold, detached. But as time passed, those labels stopped working. The silence didn't fade like she expected. It deepened. It started to haunt her. She began to realize that you weren't playing games. You had changed. And that's when her curiosity transformed into something far more dangerous: fascination. She no longer wanted to understand why you went silent. She wanted to feel what you were feeling. That's the psychological switch. The hunter becomes the haunted. The one who left becomes the one who can't stop looking back. She starts testing you without even realizing it. A reaction here, a memory there. Maybe she posts an old song you both liked, or a throwback picture that seems innocent but carries hidden meaning. Every move is designed to provoke something, to make you break your silence and remind her that she still has influence. But when there's no response, the silence becomes unbearable, because now it's not just silence, it's rejection. And rejection from a calm man hits differently. It doesn't scream anger or desperation. It whispers indifference. It's quiet, but it's devastating. Her ego can rationalize hatred, but it can't process being irrelevant. The longer the silence continues, the more her mind starts rewriting history. She'll remember every time you stayed patient when she tested your limits, every time you showed care when she was cold, every time you listened when she only talked about herself. But now she sees it from a different angle. Before, she saw those acts as proof that she had power. Now, she sees them as reminders that she took something valuable for granted. That realization doesn't heal her, it haunts her. Because silence gives space for reflection, and reflection turns attraction into regret. She starts comparing every new man to you, not because you were perfect, but because your composure has now become her standard. You've become the ghost in every room, the echo in every laugh, the thought she can't silence at night. That's the cost of underestimating a man who chooses stillness over chaos. And here's the paradox she'll never admit. Your silence doesn't make her hate you. It makes her miss you. Because silence triggers imagination, and imagination is far stronger than memory. She doesn't remember the fights anymore. She remembers the feeling of being near your calm. You've turned from an ex into an archetype, something she measures others against but can never replicate. That's the psychological switch. When you stopped explaining, she started overthinking. When you walked away quietly, she started walking in circles. You didn't destroy her ego through revenge. You dismantled it through evolution. Because nothing disturbs a woman's peace more than realizing the man she thought she broke is the one she can no longer reach. Section 6. The Stoic Principle of Detachment. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the quiet decision to no longer participate in your own suffering. After the chaos, after the heartbreak, after the noise of her leaving, there comes a point when a man stops asking why and starts saying enough. That's the moment you stepped into Stoic detachment, not to escape emotion, but to master it. You didn't stop caring, you stopped chasing what drained you. You realized that love without respect is self-betrayal, and chasing validation is just another form of slavery. Detachment isn't about pretending you don't feel. It's about no longer letting those feelings control your direction. The silence you've chosen isn't emptiness, it's discipline. It's the kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't prove, doesn't seek. It simply is. When you reached that space, something inside you shifted permanently. You no longer looked at her as the source of your peace. You became the source. You started to build your routine, your focus, your mission. You poured your energy into purpose instead of pain. That's what Stoic detachment teaches. Emotions are messengers, not masters. Pain isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. And in those quiet nights, when her ghost still crossed your mind, you didn't fight it. You observed it. You let it rise. You let it fade. That's the strength of a man who's evolved past reaction. He feels everything, but acts on nothing impulsively. You didn't seek closure because you learned the truth. Closure doesn't come from her words. It comes from your acceptance. You stopped seeking justice for your heart and started seeking peace for your soul. Meanwhile, your silence became something she couldn't interpret. She thought ignoring you would make you chase. But now, she's the one watching you rebuild. You didn't need to post a comeback. You became one. You started moving differently, talking differently, walking with quiet confidence. You weren't trying to prove anything, but everything about your calm energy became proof that you'd transcended her chaos. That's when detachment becomes magnetic. It's not a mask, it's mastery. You've learned to be content without control, strong without noise, powerful without proof. That's a language very few understand, but every ego feels. She can't stop thinking about you, not because you're playing games, but because you're finally free from them. True Stoic detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means choosing what deserves your energy. You learn to let go without bitterness, to forgive without reconnection, to remember without pain. You realize that silence is not distance, it's presence in its highest form, presence with yourself. That's what she can't replicate, no matter who she's with next. Because peace can't be faked. You've built yours through silence, through restraint, through the understanding that love is not control, it's respect, and respect begins within. You no longer crave to be understood by her, you're too busy understanding yourself. And that's what destroys her ego completely, knowing she no longer defines you. She was a chapter, but you've become the book. Section 7. The Return of the Power. And then comes the full circle, the quiet moment when power returns to its rightful place. She once held it in her hands, thinking it was permanent. She believed your attention was endless, that your love was unconditional, no matter how carelessly she treated it. But power built on ego always collapses. One day, her curiosity outweighs her pride. Maybe it starts small, a random hey after months of silence, a reaction to an old story, or a message disguised as casual conversation. But you can feel it. You've entered her thoughts again. Only this time, it's different. You're no longer the man waiting for her reply. You're the man she's trying to reach. That's what silence does. It reverses the current. The man who once chased has become the one who's quietly pursued. But here's where most men fail. They mistake her return for redemption. They think her message means she's changed, that she's finally realized their worth. But the truth is simpler and colder. She's not coming back for love. She's coming back for reassurance. She wants to know if she still has power. She needs to see if the silence that destroyed her ego was real or just another phase. And that's where your discipline matters most. Because the test isn't whether she reaches out. It's how you respond when she does. Do you break the silence just to prove you've healed? Or do you let the quiet speak for you one last time? The Stoic man doesn't rush to reopen old wounds. He knows that peace is far more valuable than attention. Now she scrolls through your world and sees something she never expected, stillness that radiates strength. You're not flaunting, not performing, not trying to prove anything. You've evolved beyond her approval. You've built a life that doesn't orbit around her presence or her absence. And that's the moment her ego truly shatters, when she realizes she no longer has emotional access to you. Because women don't regret losing men they can still reach. They regret losing the ones who've transcended the game entirely. That's you now. Your silence isn't a tactic anymore. It's your natural state. You don't need to prove detachment. You are detachment. The same quiet that once hurt you has become your armor, your identity, your power. So when she finally returns, wondering if the door is still open, remember, closure doesn't come from conversation. It comes from understanding who you've become. You don't need to reject her with bitterness or welcome her with longing. You simply stand where you are, grounded, calm, unmoved, because the man who masters silence masters himself. And once you master yourself, no woman, no heartbreak, no ego can ever control you again. She broke your heart, but your silence rebuilt it into something unbreakable. Now, she's the one haunted by what she can't fix, what she can't reach, what she can't forget. That's the final victory. Not her apology, not her regret, but your evolution. The power has returned, and this time it's permanent. In the end, silence wasn't the punishment. It was the transformation. It was the bridge between who you were and who you've become. You entered that storm as a man who needed answers and emerged as one who no longer needed validation. The heartbreak that once felt unbearable became your initiation into strength. You learned that silence isn't emptiness, it's awareness. It's where you stopped chasing love and started embodying it. You stopped looking for peace in her eyes and began building it in your own reflection. That's what she never expected, that the man she thought she broke would use the pain to rise higher than she could ever reach. Your silence became the mirror she couldn't face and the reminder of the man she underestimated. There's something sacred about walking away quietly. You didn't post about it. You didn't make a speech. You didn't seek pity. You simply withdrew your energy and let the truth reveal itself. The peace she mistook for indifference was actually your rebirth. Because silence teaches you what words never could. That power doesn't come from control. It comes from composure. It's the art of not reacting, of letting time and discipline speak louder than emotion. She thought your silence meant you didn't care, but it meant you finally cared enough about yourself to stop wasting your voice where it wasn't valued. And that's when everything changed. She started hearing the echo of your absence in every moment of her noise. You became the man she can't forget, not because you tried to impress her, but because you mastered yourself. You're no longer defined by rejection. You're defined by restraint. You learned to love deeply without losing your center. You learned to feel pain without being consumed by it. And most importantly, you learned that closure doesn't come from her apology. It comes from your evolution. She may never understand the depth of your silence, but that's not your concern anymore. You didn't go quiet to teach her a lesson. You went quiet to protect your peace. The lesson was a byproduct of your growth. So now, as she looks back, replaying the memories that once fed her ego, she feels the one thing she never anticipated: respect. Respect for the man who didn't fight dirty, who didn't crumble, who didn't seek revenge. Your silence spoke truth louder than any argument could. You can't destroy a man who finds power in stillness. She broke your heart, but your silence broke her illusion. And now, when she lies awake wondering how you could simply walk away and never look back, she'll realize the truth. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. You didn't lose her, you released her. And in that release, you found yourself. Because in the end, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of strength. And once a man learns to find peace in that quiet, he never returns to chaos again.